Part 2 of Why You Truly Never Know Someone. He decided to stay with my mom for a month instead. Every day I would message and check up on him. I would always get the same vague answer saying that he's good and thanking us for helping him out. One day, my mom called me in a panicked state. She told me that he was in his room with a knife and threatening to unalive himself. I immediately drove over and talked him down, taking the knife away from him. Later that night, I called to check up on him because I was worried. He didn't answer. I called my mom to check on him and she said that he was in his room. I asked her to go check and when she did, he was nowhere to be found. Later, we found out where he had gone that night. Apparently, he walked over to his ex-girlfriend's house to spy on her and her boyfriend. I'm not sure what shifted in him, but he walked behind the house and ripped off a piece of his shirt. He stuffed the ripped shirt in a crack of the window and set the fabric on fire. Then he just walked away. He attempted to kill his child, ex-girlfriend, and an unknown man. Luckily, no one was harmed because the adults in the house were still awake and smelled the fire. They quickly got the children to safety and called the fire department. My best friend admitted to this and has since been in jail. After this, I stopped all contact. It's been 9 years. It's crazy to think that the closest person to you can have a deep dark side and there's nothing you can do about it. Story time about my scariest experience being home alone. When I was 14, I lived with my grandparents. They lived in an old bungalow type of house. It was one story and we had stairs that went right up to the attic. No one ever used the attic and it was just used to store things. My room door was near the stairs leading up to the attic, which I hated because I always got scared something would crawl down when I left my room. One night, my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport. They wouldn't be back until early morning. I told them that I'd be safe at home overnight. We lived in a gated community with guard dogs and I thought everything would be okay. Before they left, we had an early dinner and I was stuck doing the dishes. While I was doing this, I could hear the neighboring dogs barking a lot, but I didn't think much of it because they always did that. After cleaning, I locked every window, shut off the lights, and headed to bed. When I entered my room, the lights were on and everything looked completely normal. I had barred and tinted windows because my grandparents didn't want anyone peeping in my room since it was a one-story house. They were barred because when my uncle was younger, he'd always sneak out, so they put bars on the window to prevent him from doing that. When I turned off the lights to go to bed, I saw a silhouette of a man illuminated by the streetlights standing outside of my window. I thought I was hallucinating. When I turned on the lights, he was gone. When I turned them off, he was there. Part 2 of my scariest experience when I was home alone. When I turned the lights on and off the third time, the man's figure wasn't there either time. I sighed in relief and thought my mind was just playing tricks on me or that something was casting a shadow. I double locked my door to be safe with one on the doorknob and one of those latch-type locks. I tucked myself in bed and tried to fall asleep even though the dogs were still barking outside. When I was finally falling asleep, I heard something above me moving. Something in the attic. I pushed the thought down and hugged my pillow, telling myself it was just rats. My heart sank when I heard someone hurriedly go down the stairs and stop at the bottom. I covered myself with a blanket and waited, wishing my grandparents had given me a phone for a time like this. Suddenly, I heard my doorknob being gently fiddled. I wanted to vomit when I heard a click followed by a quiet turn of the knob. It turned, but it didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. I finally stood up and softly pushed my body against the door, locking everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound. I don't know why they stopped, but they did. Then I heard footsteps go up the stairs as I sat there. I saw something move in the corner of my eye and there outside of my window was the shadow. I forced my eyes closed and ignored it until I fell asleep. All I remember is the next day I was having breakfast with my family. I brought it up to my grandparents, but they scoffed that it was probably rats. I never brought it up again, but the attic window had been opened. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, The Boy in the Box. Sadly, the DNA and dental testing was a bust. Several people came forward with information relating to the case, but police weren't able to verify any testimonies. However, a few theories have been introduced over the years. In 2002, a psychiatrist called in about the case with a promising lead on behalf of a woman named Martha. During a 3-hour interview, Martha talked about her childhood. She told police her mother had purchased the boy in 1954 from his biological parents. The mother physically and sexually abused Martha and the boy. One day, the boy fell sick in the bathtub and the mother became enraged, beating him to death. She wrapped the boy in a blanket, put him in the car, and took Martha with her to dispose of him. However, Martha suffered from serious mental health issues and this made her an unreliable witness. An investigator who wasn't giving up on the case sought the help of a psychic in New Jersey. This psychic stated that the boy came from a house in Philadelphia which he described in great detail, despite never having been there. The house was less than 2 miles down the road from where the boy was found. It was a foster home ran by a couple who had over 20 foster children. They had a bassinet that they bought from an auction like the one that the boy was discovered in, as well as blankets similar to the one that the boy was wrapped in. After countless interviews, nothing concrete was found. To this day, the case is still unsolved. Story time about how a guy led me on, so I got with his dad. I had just moved out of my parents' place and moved in with some friends. I had been single for about 6 months after a 3-year relationship. During that time, I worked on myself while also mingling with people here and there, but no one seriously caught my eye. That changed when my friends had a kickback and invited a guy named Stefan. We were instantly drawn to each other and ended up talking closely the whole night. Then we started messaging and going on cute little dates. Over the next few weeks, I started developing real feelings for him. When I told him that I liked him, he reciprocated that he felt the same. One thing led to another and we started hooking up. He even introduced me to his dad who was divorced and his younger brother. I would give his younger brother rides to school sometimes when he or his dad couldn't. I'd also go over to his house and wait for him sometimes after class while hanging out with his family. Everything seemed to be going great and I thought that we would eventually make it official, but I wasn't in a rush or thinking too much into it. Then one day I texted Stefan for a quick hangout, if you know what I mean, before my class started. I was surprised to see him text back and say, "Nah, I'm gonna pass." I thought it was weird but respected it and assumed that he was just having a bad day. However, over the next few weeks he became distant and cold towards me. Then I found out why. Part 2 of how a guy led me on, so I got with his dad. One morning, I woke up and texted Stefan the usual good morning text. When I didn't get a response all day, I just shrugged it off as him being busy. A short while later, I checked his story on Instagram and saw that he was with his coworker. When I clicked her tag and went to her profile, there was a picture of them together, kissing. I was hurt but mostly shocked. When I checked the post, it was clear that they recently started dating. He had commented a bunch of heart and kissing emojis under it as well. When I confronted Stefan, he acted like we were just friends and made me feel stupid for thinking there was anything there in the first place. I felt invalidated and crazy. Unfortunately, I had already told Stefan's dad that I would take his younger brother to school the next morning. When I showed up, his dad told me that he could actually take him. However, I asked to tag along since I was already there. After we dropped him off, we started talking about smoothies. Somehow, we ended up going back to their house and I made us smoothies. We were really getting along and spent the whole day together. The next night when Stefan wasn't home, we met up again. He made me dinner and we danced to some romantic music. I ended up hooking up with Stefan's dad that night. The next morning, I snapped a picture of us in bed and sent it to Stefan on Snapchat. He went ballistic and then I blocked him. I hooked up with his dad a few more times after that. Story time about how my grandfather single-handedly ruined the family name. My grandfather on my paternal side was a native of a small city. He was popular and known for having one of the best catering services in the area. He also owned a bank. His family was so popular that the other members in town owned businesses as well, such as flower shops, liquor stores, and so on. However, my grandfather was a huge narcissist. He was abusive to my father. When my father was only 7 years old, my grandmother passed away from cancer in her discs. She was the sweetest person and a ray of sunshine. Not even 2 months later, my grandfather brought home a minor who was only 16 years old and married her. He was already cheating on my grandmother with her. His new wife was also abusive towards my father in traumatizing ways. Even though he had a new wife, my grandfather still belonged to the streets. He was on a clapping spree most of his life, cheating on her with multiple women. Most of the time, to be able to do the deed, he would take Viagra. During one of his hookups, he had a heart attack and died with a full-on erection. The mortician needed help slaying his kraken for his viewing, so they had to tape it down to his thigh because it would not go down. His wife quickly found out about his affairs and was so angry that she buried him without a tombstone. This happened when I was around 12 years old. However, the story doesn't end there. Part 2 of how my grandfather single-handedly ruined the family name. After my grandfather's death, the kids from his previous marriages and his affairs came forward. Since my grandfather was wildly successful and rich, they started fighting with his wife to take my grandfather's house and belongings. It was a whole fiasco that involved court cases and lawyers. His widowed wife didn't want to deal with anything that had to do with him, including his children. She left all his belongings and house to them to fight over like cats and dogs. Due to this, the whole town found out everything that happened, including the cause of his embarrassing death. Plot twist, his widowed wife apparently already had suspicions that my grandfather was cheating on her, so she got herself a younger man on the side. Right after she buried him, she came out victorious with a younger man and moved to a different town in Puerto Rico. She was living like a queen on the beaches with her new man, while back in town, the family name was going to shambles. Their perfect exterior and fake facades had now crumbled as their dirty towels were being exposed. They went from a clean prestige title to being known as cheaters, starting from my grandfather to his children. All the boys in the family had cheated on their wives, including my father, who cheated on my mother when I was 7 with a 17-year-old. Now the family name is a laughingstock in that town. People who want to talk about scandalous things will always bring up that family name. This is why you should be careful when staying home alone. In 2017, a local nurse's aide was attacked in her sleep by a man who had been hiding in her home. He waited for her to fall asleep before sexually assaulting her and beating her, leaving her in a vegetative state. A few weeks later, she passed away from her injuries. A week after her assault, I could have been his next target. At the time, my boyfriend was working nights Friday through Sunday and I worked as an aide in a nursing home. I didn't get home until 8 p.m. and would be by myself until 8 a.m. when my boyfriend got home. It was a Sunday night when I got home and everything was normal as I left it. I ate some food and stayed up a bit in the living room. Around 12 a.m. I decided to go to my bedroom, but the only thing that I didn't check was the back part of the house like I usually would. The bathroom in my bedroom has 2 doors. One leads to the hallway and one leads to my bedroom. I always closed the one to the hallway but left the one to the bedroom open. Around 1:30 in the morning, I was watching TV in bed when I heard footsteps coming from the back hallway. I initially thought it was the TV and just brushed it off. Then I heard the footsteps coming closer. I got out of bed and went towards the bathroom to inspect the noise when the door to the hallway suddenly swung open, almost hitting me in the face. This is when panic set in. Part 2 of why you should be careful when staying home alone. When the door swung open, I immediately punched it out of pure physical instinct. The door slammed shut again. At this point, I knew someone was in the house with me. I ran to my bed and was so panicked that I grabbed my phone and called the first person in my recent calls list. It was my boyfriend's mother. I shakingly told her what was going on and she quickly called the police for me while staying on the line. A couple minutes went by when the footsteps approached my bedroom door again and I could only... It was time for us to change, to this world can be opaque, I know, 'cause I can feel it too.